Okay, great. Thank you everybody for being here. I'm really happy to see all of your faces. Megan, thank you for setting aside the time. Dr. Matthews, great to see you again. What we're going to do is just introduce ourselves briefly, why we're here, curious about neurodiversity in the workplace. And then Dr. Matthews will open with a few remarks based on his experience and research, and then we'll throw it over to Megan for her thoughts. So Maria, we'll start with you. Thank you so much. And then Carly and Michelle.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me to participate in this. I'm really interested in this as I've been working with a lot of individuals who are like in the 5 to 10 year cusp of retirement, those that are going into retirement, and just learning about the different ways that people process actually going into the change of retirement, like what they think it's going to be and then what it actually is. And there seems to be like this 6 month to almost 2 year gap of like they prepare financially, but not maybe mentally and cognitively those big changes. So I was really interested to, hear what is going to be shared here, in terms of like the clientele that I work with. So thanks again.
Carly, what made you curious enough to pop into this today?
Well, because you suggested it, Allie. So like, well, if you're suggesting it, then I'm probably interested in it. And but really, honestly, that's the simple answer.
Well, it's nice to see you. And so I'll put myself on the spot. The reason this is important to me is because as far as I am concerned, neurodiversity is all around us all the time. If we're curious enough to get to know people and understand really honestly why they are not thriving. I don't see any of the diagnostic codes that fall under the umbrella of neurodiversity, which is typically autism spectrum disorder or ADHD. I don't see those as disorders. I see them as differences, and that's really how the term was coined. But I think in the workplace, and what I'm really curious about is, sometimes we're not curious enough about why somebody is struggling. And I would prefer to think about it more along the lines of failure to thrive in school. I know Michelle cares about that, or in the workplace. So this is a topic that is really near and dear to my heart, and I'm very thankful to have the opportunity to continue this conversation every month. So Michelle, I'll throw it over to you, and then to you, Dr. Matthews, for opening remarks.
Hi, Allie. Thanks so much for including me. I just figure I consider myself one of the regulars on this at this point. And every time I participate in any of your discussions, I always come away with learning so much. And as you know, I'm the president of the Massachusetts Association for Gifted Education, and this is my life. This is my community. I was former board chair of PG Retreat, Profoundly Gifted Retreat. I've been involved in the Davidson Institute. I have 3 profoundly gifted children, one who is quite neurodivergent, and I live this as well as help a lot of clients with this. So it's very important that we talk about this more.
Thank you. And Dr. Matthews, I am so thankful that you're here as always. Dr. Matthews is a professor and director of academically and intellectually gifted graduate programs at UNC Charlotte. And we've been talking now for, I think, about 6 months. I'm so thankful for your presence. What made you curious enough to continue this conversation about neurodiversity in the workplace?
Yeah, I mean, this is a fascinating area to look at. And of course, here at UNC Charlotte, I'm part of a department that includes also early childhood education and special education. And so one of the areas that our department is known for is we have a center here that studies and helps parents learn more about transition, particularly transition at the secondary level for students with disabilities. But I find this is a really understudied area when we're talking about high ability kids, and we're just barely starting to think about what does this look like for high functioning students, and what are the analogous things that we need to keep in mind. And so I'm excited to see so much interest in so many people here today, willing to think about these things and talk about them. I think the last maybe couple of decades, the field of gifted education, where my work has started to think about students who are twice exceptional. or have multiple exceptionalities that include giftedness. And I think we also, as sort of a broader part of that, are also coming to a greater awareness of the many strengths that students with things diagnosed things like autism spectrum disorder are bringing to their lives and to the lives of the people around them. And there's very little on career transition or career fit in gifted students to begin with, and the little that's out there, at least nothing I've read, has looked at students that are in these other areas, although I've seen it anecdotally. I remember many years ago, NAGC, when it was in Salt Lake City, one of the tours that I was able to go on with them was a tour of a business that made amusement park rides, and the founder of it, excuse me, the founder of the company just had some fascinating things to say about sort of his own neurodivergence and how he had turned that into a strength by making this company that has these thrill-seeking rides. And we got to ride on one, and yeah, it was kind of terrifying, even at I think half scale of what the full-size ride was going to be. But this is a guy who had a picture of himself standing like on top of one of his rides, 300 feet, whatever, up in the air, and he was just loving it. And so for his personality, he had been able to find that successful fit, and it just worked out really well for him. But we don't see that good fit as often as I think we'd all like to see it. And so it's an important topic to talk more about. But again, very, very little research that I'm aware of specific to this converging area of these 2 or 3 different areas, each of which may have some work in that area, but not the overlap with the other areas. So with that said, I'll be happy to turn it over and hear from you guys. So
Thank you so much, Dr. Matthews. 2 themes really jumped out there, Megan, and I can't help but identify them before I hand it over to you. I'm sorry, but I love how you really went to strengths, Dr. Matthews. And I think that's where all of us are coming from. You know, on this call with me, Maria and Carly and myself are all professional coaches now. We very much believe in identifying and pulling out those strengths that people are not even aware of that they have themselves. And, you know, in this time, many young people coming up through education may have diagnoses. They may have gotten help and been diagnosed, but some of us actually shrink from putting people in boxes and using labels. And so for children who have parents of that mindset, or the adults who are listening to us feel similarly, that they really prefer not to put themselves in a box, there are people in the workplace now who identify with the challenges of neurodiversity, but do not have the comfort and security of a group or a label, perhaps. So I think what we need to do is be vigilant to all of those who, label or not, are simply not thriving, and be curious about what their strengths are and really tap into that. So with that said, Megan, I'm so happy to have you here, and please introduce yourself, your journey, and the floor is yours.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. I'm Meghan Bonde. I'm a neurodivergent workforce specialist. I've made a transition from a long background in public education, really focused on neurodiversity. I spent time as a speech language pathologist and an assistive technology specialist and a social emotional learning coach, gifted and talented coach. So many different areas that I was interested in really thinking about how can we leverage the strengths of our neurodivergent students? How can we create the environment and the systems for them to really thrive and learn, and not be looking at the deficits of the students that we perceive, but really look at what can we do to change and really use universal design for learning approaches. And really my transition to a workforce specialist came after I discovered that I was gifted and realized that my needs were not met as an employee. And so I really started to include myself in my advocacy and made the shift to create a work environment that met my unique needs and leveraged my unique strengths. It's been an amazing journey. I just discovered my neurodivergence about 2 years ago in 2021 when my kids got identified at school, and I started to dig in deeper and understand what giftedness really meant. And it has just opened up my world to be able to find other people who want to discover their strengths and get the supports they need in an environment that they need at work. One of the things that I'm really passionate about when I coach a lot of twice exceptional adults in navigating their sort of launch to their career force and transitioning off the cliff of high school or college and into a whole different environment is really understanding the myths. Because I think employers who don't really understand neurodiversity and neurodivergence and these myths are missing out on high potential top talent. And they are putting so many resources into consultants and job boards to be at the top of the job board, and recruiting people and figuring out their hiring processes and staffing agencies and people that are taking this huge chunk. And they are missing out on so many applicants as a result of the systems not really taking into account the common myths and misconceptions about people who are neurodivergent and are wired differently, don't quite fall into the box of average, whatever that is.
Do you mind if I ask a question?
Yeah, I'd love to.
When you share, like, what are the common myths? What are some of those common myths that that you're talking about?
Some of the things that I notice, even when I'm coaching people looking through job descriptions, that employers think that high potential applicants will accurately judge their fit for a job based on the job description. And what I'm finding is that it's challenging for people to even click on that application button to fill out the application because of how things are worded in the job description. And so the employer might think, oh, they'll kind of be able to know that if they have similar experiences or skills, that would be good enough. But we'll put that this college degree is required, or this many years of experience is required, or they'll know what I mean by good communication and social skills. Well, how do you define that at your workplace? Because there are different definitions of what is considered effective communication or effective social skills, and it's not the same for everybody. And so when you put vague things or put barriers and requirements on there, you're leaving out people who have the skills needed but may not check all of the boxes, and they are not going to apply if it doesn't really match up. They're very often detail oriented and may not want to put themselves out there when they feel that there's likely rejection going to happen because it doesn't quite match the criteria or it's vague. So that's one myth. Another myth is that high potential applicants are going to have a college degree or advanced degrees. That's not always the case. Our educational systems, after years in them, are not designed for people who are wired differently. That includes K through 12 and it includes higher education. And so there's tons of untapped talent who may not have those degrees. That would be a barrier. Same with a high GPA or lots of awards and achievement. There are amazing individuals with amazing skills who may not have those types of things on paper that we're really leaving out due to the systems and not due to a deficit to their abilities. you know, the myth that a high potential applicant could never be disabled. That's just not true. Those differences that people who identify as autistic or ADHD or dyslexic or any of the other myriad of neurodivergent brains, they just have so many strengths. And so many high potential applicants do also have a disability, and that doesn't mean that they won't bring amazing strengths to the job. Some other things, like they'll easily ask for accommodations and support through the hiring process. That's not an easy thing to do. It's really hard to really pinpoint what is the question, who do I reach out to, what are the types of things I can ask for, will that automatically make them not want me because I'm too difficult to deal with, I have too many needs, I'm just too much. So many different barriers that with really simple tweaks and adjustments, it's not really complex. The companies can really be attracting some of this top talent and these high potential applicants to even get them through the door to be able to then, you know, evaluate their skills and see if it would be a good fit.
Dr. Matthews, I know you need to jump off. Is there anything that you would like to ask or add before you jump off?
Yeah, unfortunately, I do need to jump off, but yeah, I think the one other thing that occurred to me, I think, to mention is that I'm hearing a lot in the last just 2 or 3 years about a lot more, I think, self-awareness from people of their own characteristics and also of where their own characteristics fall in regard to sort of the term I hear now is neurotypical people. And there's a lot more awareness, I find out now, that people realize sometimes quite late in life that they're not like everyone else, even though they had thought all along that they were. They're discovering now that they aren't actually in some ways, and then they're able to think more about that and how that's influenced where they are and where they want to be and so forth in their lives. So I think that's been kind of a fascinating development, and I don't recall really seeing that much until just very recently, the last few years here. So yeah, I'll listen for a second and see what you think there, if that's a reasonable perception that I've come upon, but then I'll have to go ahead and sign off.
Yeah, I think the self-awareness is such a huge piece, and that it's a strength-based self-awareness, because many people may be highly aware of the supposed deficits that they have from all of the you know, interventions that people have tried to focus on throughout their school years, or all of the struggles of the things that haven't come easily or gone well for them. But the reality is, once they really hone in on their self-awareness of what their strengths are, what they bring to the table, and some of the accommodations and needs that they have, and that those needs are valid and okay, and using tools is not a crutch or doesn't make you weak, that it can just be absolutely transformational for someone to be able to thrive, contribute their gifts to a greater purpose and mission-driven organization, which is really important.
Thank you for those last reflections, Megan. That was very eloquently put, and I'm so thankful that you're looking at this, because you're so right. Many of the systems have been very good at identifying deficits and trying to get people through a linear pathway, when in fact they may not be, you know, the kinds of students that thrive in that kind of an environment. And I'm so thankful to hear you talking about the absence of college degrees potentially. Dr. Matthews, we didn't have time to get it in today, but previous podcasts with him, we've talked a lot about underachievement, and the data in Virginia I have shared previously showing that our very high ability males in particular are less likely to continue on and complete college, interestingly enough, those males with over 1,400 SAT. have lower completion rates than the ones with the 900 to 1190. So it's really fascinating to think about that untapped talent.
There was actually a
Absolutely.
report that was done, gosh, was it 2014, at Harvard on a big percentage of the top percentile of high school graduates were not going to college. That's actually on our MAGE website now. And it was something like 18%, or it was a big number of the top scorers in the standardized testing. So this is really fascinating for me because I see this in my daily life, because these are the kids in our community, these super highly, profoundly gifted kids who tend to also come with overexcitabilities, or some other types of sensitivities that go along with the high intelligence. What can we do for them?
Yeah, such a good question. I really think we need to take the universal design for learning approach and think about how are we applying it for universal design for the workplace. And I have a method that I call the EDGE method to kind of highlight some of the key concepts that employers can do to really be inclusive and leverage the strengths. And I think we need to be designing to the edges, because when we design to the middle, it really fits nobody. You know, the myth of average, that it's good for no one. When we do design our systems to the edges, we're really helping everybody, including these really high potential top talent employees. So the E stands for eliminate barriers. And the eliminate barriers piece can be, we're requiring college, we're requiring certain years of experience, we're requiring you to be able to read everything versus being able to listen to the information, things like that. Really taking away those barriers to make sure people can get in the door and grow and learn as part of an organization. And then the D for EDGE is define the skills. So let's get really clear about the skills that are needed, the skills that we might be able to teach somebody, that they don't necessarily have to come in with that skill, but it's something that they could learn and grow within for that on-the-job learning, and really define what does it mean to be an effective communicator, and redefine it and expand the definition of what it means, or what does it mean to have good social skills, or good organization, things like that, that we can really expand what's possible and define those skills. Then the G for EDGE is guide. Let's guide people. Let's give them some clear expectations and checklists or steps and criteria to go through the application process, what to expect in the hiring process, how to go through the onboarding, how to navigate the systems of the organization, how can you communicate and what are the different ways, how can you grow. And so being that guide to really make clear some of the hidden rules and things that aren't really transparent is so important, and making that guide really neurodiversity affirming for all the different brains. And then E in EDGE is just empower with options. If we're going to be sharing information, let's do it in an auditory and visual multisensory way. If we offer some assistive technology tools, like let's share those and invite people. Maybe they don't even know what they can ask for or what might support them with their needs to be able to accomplish their goals and thrive at work. So let's put those options into place, whether it's for getting the work done, whether it's for attending meetings, attending professional development, where we're learning, and really empower people to align the way they're doing things with their preferences, with the way that their brain is wired, so that they're not just going against the current, trying to fit in the box or mask, which is ultimately exhausting and leads to burnout, losing some really amazing people.
That's a brilliant acronym. I love that. Please jump in, Carly or Maria or Michelle, if you have any questions and follow-up to that.
I don't have follow-up to that, but I was wondering, Allie, you had made the correlation between high SAT scores and neurodivergent people and then not going on to finish college. And then you said, which is leading to a lot of untapped potential. And I'm just wondering why you're making the correlation between finishing college and somebody not becoming their full potential.
That's a good question, Carly. And that's actually the reason why I'm coaching now, because I realize that's another myth. Because finishing college is how I was raised to think I would be able to find security and feed myself. Coming from generations of families going through college, and then my husband being the first to go through college himself, just having that be a milestone that was rather arbitrary, honestly. And then when our son decided that it wasn't for him, I had to completely reframe what it means to go through college. And I'm thinking about those who drop out. The reason why I made that correlation and made that statement is they're probably surrounded by people who thought the same as I did, that if you finish college, you're leaving something on the, or if you don't finish and you step away from that path, you may be leaving potential that is untapped. That may be true if they're not surrounded by people who appreciate their strengths and come from a strengths-based mindset and are really intent on working with them to help them figure out what it is that they really want to do, what really makes them passionate, what are they curious about, what have they always been curious about. It may be that due to masking, and this is very true for women, we can go through school and get good grades, even get those high SAT scores, but not be happy, not actually be pursuing our passions and really just kind of checking boxes. And not until later in life are we actually able to figure out what it is that we're really wanting to do, what we're really called to do. And that can be a real struggle. So the reason I am called to coaching is to help young people who are feeling like a particular system, whether it's a school or a workplace, is not working for them, to not fall into the old thinking that I had, that I'm a failure, or that I was a bad parent, that I didn't coach my son well enough to help him get through school, that if I had only punished him more, he would get the grades that he needed, or go to class more, or these were things that we were told by teams of educators, just be a better parent. You're not punishing enough, you're not leveraging him enough. And that's not what our approach was at all. It never was. But at the end of the day, many people feel like these arbitrary milestones, these markers along a path, ensure success, the ability to adult and thrive. And that's not necessarily true at all. And it takes a lot of courage to step off the kind of, I guess, this system-wide perspective of what is success and find what true success is. And it could be very different. And I think that is a really interesting and curious world to live in, but also uncomfortable for many people, for parents who are trying to guide their kids with love, but are also worried about, what does the future look like? Where are they really going? And we don't have a team of people to help them uncover that. And when everyone is driven by fear-based choices instead of conscious-based choices, it's tough. It's a tough environment. So thank you for asking that question, Carly. What are your thoughts?
Well, I'm thinking about how the scope of the standard for success I've only ever been an American, is very narrow, right? School is set up in a way that caters to feminine proclivities, but we still have boys in the classroom. And that's just one example, right? So the parameters that are set are already exclusive. But then you're made to believe that these are the standards that, you're supposed to be this and you're not. Ugh. There's that kind of attitude about it. And then you go on to finish school and society has told people that the next logical step for success is college. And like you said, now you're realizing and reflecting that that might not actually be what's best. And let's be honest, college has changed tremendously since 1962, okay, when you could afford to go, or whenever. And also the programs themselves are also so specifically gauged to a certain end, be that ideologies or whatever. So I keep seeing all these boxes being formed, right? You're in school, public school, you're in a tiny little box. You don't fit in, puke on you. Sorry, but and then you move on and you graduate high school and you're supposed to fit in this other tiny box, right? And now I hear Meghan talking about, okay, well, we have to kind of break the box because we're excluding people who have a lot of potential to do good in the workforce. Amazing. So the thing I'm curious about, though, Meghan, is, and I mean this with love, so don't think I'm coming for you, but it seems as though what we're doing really is just making more boxes. Okay, that box doesn't fit you. Well, here's a formula in this box. Does this box fit you? And if you exclude things that catapult people into self-discovery, you can have 1,000 different formulas that apply to nobody or exclude the best somebody. You know what I'm saying? Because it is still a formula. It's still a box. It might be a different box, but it's still a box. So it really comes down, just observationally from my perspective, take it or leave it, is that unless people are really doing that thought-provoking self-reflection, which, let's be honest, if anybody can deceive anybody, it's us ourselves to ourselves, right? We'll never really know what we could be. And identity is rooted in so much more than what we actually do to make money, right? So I understand you're trying to take this broad thing of identity and gifting and all these things, and you have quite the task at your hands, Meghan, because how do you make that so somebody can walk through a system that will propel them into a more opportunity or a better sense of self when identity is rooted in so much more than what we do? Like, so I'll just let you riff on that. I don't really have a question. It's just a reflection on these things.
I actually have some thoughts on that, because if you take a step back and you look at what has been the purpose of education for the last 50, 60 years, more longer, it's been to create factory workers, right? I mean, we had this great industrial revolution and we needed people to run the factories and to work in the factories. And that's no longer our work environment for the most part. There's a lot more variety out there, but our education system hasn't changed to reflect that. And sadly, a lot of vocational programs have gone away in the last 30 years, 30, 40 years. I don't know what it's like outside of Massachusetts, but in Massachusetts, there's next to no vocational programs. So it's school to college. And if you don't do that, then kind of floating. So what I see with this EDGE philosophy, which is, I have so many questions about this. It's fabulous. I really enjoy it. And my husband actually used to be in recruiting business. He was working for one of the large recruiting companies. And I'm thinking, if there's a way to get this information out there to companies to let them know that they really need to be thinking about this and kind of outside the box that they've been in, that would be really valuable. But just to answer what you were saying, Carly, I think where this fits in with Meghan is that, we don't know everybody in our environment anymore. We're hiring strangers, right? We're not in tribes anymore where we know everybody. So we need heuristics. We need ways of being able to tick boxes and say, okay, this is going to meet my needs in this way. And we need flags that are going to let us know that this person's going to be a good fit. And right now, the boxes and flags that exist are missing out on a whole community, whole part of our population, and I think what Meghan's doing is saying, okay, there is, in the Venn diagram of this, there's also this group out here. I'm not saying this is the entire world, but there's also a big chunk of people that you can capture out here if you use this EDGE plan. Is that kind of what you were saying, Meghan?
Yeah, I mean, it is about taking steps forward and making things more adjustable and more inclusive. And every time we move in the direction of the vision of just removing all boxes and eliminating all the barriers and structures that really kind of limit us reaching our potential and thriving, we're moving closer. And so I think it's so important to keep the vision like Carly has of just really deeply thinking about our full identity and all of the ways we can thrive. And we also have to meet the organizations where they're at, because we know that learning happens when they feel like safe enough to learn, like they're being acknowledged that we know you've been doing the best you can. I believe that about everybody. And what are the tools and approaches and methods and common language we can use to move it forward and expand? And every time we do that for gifted, twice exceptional, neurodivergent people, it's a step in the right direction for everybody, with all the different intersectionalities that people bring, their different pieces of their identity. And so focusing in on, do you want gifted people to help you with your mission? Do you want people who have this widely asynchronous development where they have these amazing strengths and they may have other areas that look different or challenging, don't come as naturally to them? If you want that, this is what you can do. And it can really move us in the direction to take steps forward in creating a more inclusive environment. And it's not going to be perfect, and that's really hard, because I'm definitely someone who loves things to be at a very high standard of excellence. And so to be able to think about how can we take what we have and make the adjustments to move forward. And some of them don't have to be small, because some simple adjustments are truly transformational and do make a really big difference and a big step forward. And so I think that's the goal, is thinking about how can we adjust. Like the universal design for learning story that I love to refer to actually relates to the military. And a while ago, their fighter jets were really designed for only a certain body size of how long your legs were and how you could fit in to be a pilot. And the military said, we need a consultant, we need help to figure out how we can have more variety in our planes, to have more pilots and widen the definition of the person who can be a pilot. And so many people said, it can't be done, it's impossible. And what ended up happening is that somebody invented adjustable seats, which are now used in our cars every day to be able to make things adjustable of how far it is to reach something and the pedals and different things. And now it's probably not perfect at 100% for every single person, but think of that one simple thing that truly has transformed how our cars and how the planes were today, so that you're not making a separate plane for everybody, but you're making it more adjustable. And I think we can make our workplaces more adjustable.
That's very well put. I think each of us is here because we're pretty innately curious people and empathetic and compassionate people. And what I'm hearing you say is, let's look for ways to make workplaces more hospitable to the widest variety of people, and to the people in the workplace already who are not thriving. Let's get curious about what's holding them back, and let's see what we can do. I actually was listening to this on another podcast, totally unrelated to this topic, but the fact that most people don't appreciate just how malleable their job description, their role really actually is. So for anybody listening to this pod who's in a job that they really don't like, let's think about having that kind of a conversation with a manager, supervisor, director, and think about how to get you more fulfilled in your job. I work with people who are really underutilized, And I can tell you there is so much pain in that. Yes, they're paying bills, and yes, there's some gratification in being employed, but to be underutilized, probably each of us has been there at some point in our lives, and to not have our innate strengths recognized and tapped really actually causes a lot of pain. So I'm curious, Megan, what are your thoughts on that? Having difficult conversations with a manager, supervisor, just thinking across the levels of employment. Where would you start if you were somebody listening to us talk about this now?
First of all, I have felt this way, absolutely. One school that I worked at, I was the gifted and talented coach that was supposed to think about how to create more inclusive systems to help the students thrive. And I created a makerspace in a classroom where there were stations where you could go to inventing station, performing arts station, writing station, engineering station. And the kids absolutely loved it. We started piloting it, and teachers would sign up to bring their kids there, and we would co-teach. And so my coaching looked a little different because I wasn't going in during a plan period to talk with a teacher, but we were working together and facilitating learning and creating the conditions for really inquiry-based learning, problem-based learning for the kids to just dive in. There was even a kindergarten class where the teacher had forgot she signed up to co-teach with me in the makerspace that day. And she was like, everybody pause your worksheet, we're gonna go. And the kids just cheered like they had won the lottery. They were so excited to get to go spend time in the makerspace. And the reality was, it made a lot of the leaders of the school uncomfortable that that's the direction I chose to do the coaching, that the coaching looked different than a one-on-one conversation with a teacher. And what I saw was that teachers really needed their plan time. We needed to get creative about how they were going to build a relationship with me, build trust, work together, try some different new strategies in a really safe environment, and take risks with the education. And to go to my boss and say, hey, I'd like to communicate about this with parents. I'd like to problem solve some of the barriers of the teachers who feel really scared to sign up for Makerspace during our pilot. I'd like some coaching that really helps me think through my next steps, because sometimes I'm feeling stuck with how to lead this change initiative at the school. And it was met with some resistance and a focus on my deficits that they perceived of what I wasn't doing, what didn't look like what they thought a coach should be doing. And so it's very, very painful to feel that level of rejection, to feel like you're going against the current, and that you don't have the supports that you need as a leader to be able to continue to move forward with something that was successful with people who were trying it, and we were working through the kinks. And so I just think like the leadership development that's required for the managers and bosses to really think through how to respond when somebody's doing something different, when you're uncomfortable or confused by an approach that somebody's taking, of how to be able to have that conversation, regulate your own emotions as a leader, and the fears of, I think the parents or the district leaders are going to be upset with me for allowing this at my school. How is this going to move the needle on the test scores? Whatever it is, that the fears that are coming up, that's what is most important to be creating these work environments where people can thrive, is to continue to develop our leaders to be able to navigate those big emotions and be able to support people who are doing things differently and taking risks.
So as somebody who worked in leadership in a previous life before I got into education, there's a few different paths, and one of the good paths that tends to work is when you go to your boss and you say, I'm struggling here. I see these people over here are working on it. they have a wonderful solution. I'd love to bring them in and maybe have them train us up and get guidance. And the reason I say that is because there are now schools in Massachusetts basically built around the makerspace model. So there's a school called NUVU, N-U-V-U, studio.org is the website. That came out of MIT. A bunch of MIT PhDs thought the current model of education was turning kids off of learning. And they basically created a makerspace with 2-week sessions that culminated. It was a 10-week, it was a 1 semester experience that they partnered with the private school. The kids would go over there for 11 weeks. They do 5 2-week modules, and then they have this big final 1-week wrap up where they do presentations on everything. And it wound up being discovered by members of the gifted community here in Massachusetts, and suddenly you had kids going full-time. And then my son found it. We pulled him out of school when he was 10 and a half. And it was only at that point for high schoolers, so it was 14 to 17-year-olds. So they let him come in and do a 2-week training at the module. They said, nah, he's good. He can hang out there. And so he stayed there for the entire school year, and then a second year, and then a third year. And then in 9th grade, wound up actually going back to the regular high school model, and then wound up doing part-time there and part-time at Stanford Online High School because he was so advanced in math. But they wound up now turning it into, well, now they invite middle schoolers to come, and they graduate kids, and kids graduate with a portfolio, not with transcripts. And they do this now all over the world. They're training. They were doing Florida. When we left 5 years ago, they were just moving into Florida, and they were in India and Bangladesh. And now, I hear the words NUVU all over the country. They are going in and training teachers to bring in this model all over the country, and it really works. And the parents of the kids who were there full time, back in the early days, said, if my kid had stayed in regular school, she wouldn't have survived. This was a model that allowed her to stay in school and to learn and to grow in an environment that was really productive for her. And these guys train.
Wonderful.
Right.
I love hearing that.
Yeah.
I think something that was probably obvious for me, but I didn't pay attention to. So any parents listening who have kids who are struggling in school, I wish I had known this earlier. You can have a mathematician physicist who is actually an artist. And I feel like the creators, the combiners and the disruptors who are not doing well in school are these really interesting, right, left brain thinkers who do not necessarily enjoy school, and they may be self-taught. They may thrive on learning. So there's absolutely nothing wrong with their ability to learn. To your point, Megan, about lower GPAs. In fact, get really curious about the person who has a high SAT on their transcript somewhere, but had poor grades. Actually really take a hard look at that person and think about what it is that didn't work well for them and what could potentially be good for you in your company to hire a person who will not do work that is not valuable. Think about the courage it takes to say, I'm not doing this because there's no value in it. Think about what an asset that would be to your company to have somebody who won't hold back with the direct and honest truth and say, this is of no value. And we can actually jump 12 steps if we go over here. That's a common thing for highly profoundly gifted, creative kids to not show their work, to come up with the answers in a creative and fascinating way. And in fact, my son told me that the best mathematicians are actually quite lazy. So I'm just going to throw that out there, Megan, and see what you think about that. I noticed.
Yeah, I mean, and I also challenge us to reframe lazy. I just love the idea that what if thriving means we're doing things with ease, that it doesn't always have to be hustle, grind, work hard. That's what it looks like to be productive, to be dedicated, to be a high achiever. What if we were all doing the things that were easy for us, that came, naturally, or were fun or interesting, meaningful? our world would be in a different place, and it wouldn't feel like everybody's just so close to the brink of burnout. Like, let's find what's easy and appear lazy, and let's like take that as a sign that we're like going in the right direction.
Right.
Well,
Yes, it does.
Yeah, for certain communities, there was this one kid that got to college, basically was a math major and been doing computer science since they were 6 years old, and got to college, and the parents really encouraged them to take computer science classes. And they walked into a couple of them and said, I know all this stuff already. But by doing that, the kid didn't get hooked into the community. And the kid graduated and then was looking for jobs and didn't know anybody, and is a incredibly award-winning, talented programmer, but doesn't have the community now. And because they refused, because they said, you know, why should I waste my time taking classes I already know how to do the answers to? So it's a whole new set of problems, right? And the kid's brilliant, but doesn't have a job.
You're so right. I'd like to just riff on that for just a second and then maybe throw it to Maria. We're back to Meghan as we wrap up, but community and connection is so important. Michelle, you're so right. And we need to find a balance between meeting the needs, the intellectual needs and the emotional needs of the person. And I just, my mantra now as a parent, as a coach is let's remove barriers, like you said, Meghan. Let's get rid of these unnecessary rules. Many of our creative people actually work best at night when the rest of the world is asleep and no one is even in their headspace, you know? So, hey, if you have somebody who's a very creative person and they seem to be up all night, you don't have to bludgeon them into, you know, a normal diurnal schedule that the rest of us are on. Maybe they're making steaks at 3 a.m. and maybe that's okay, you know? So just, I love the idea of just kind of taking down all of these expectations and these preconceived notions and going to what you said, Meghan, ease. What comes with ease and flow to people? And then what you said, Michelle, about building community and connection. Maria, I'd love to give you a chance to dive in and put you on the spot a little bit with some reflections, if that's okay. Like,
well, first of all, I feel
think?
like there's a lot of ways you're talking about me. So thank you for sharing all of that. I was like, oh, check that box, check that box. But I'm also thinking about like my own client base, although they're not in education necessarily or in school, but those that are looking for retirement, I thought about, they have this preconceived notion of what retirement is going to be, but they haven't necessarily planned for it. And they've had like this, they've worked in corporate for so long that, you know, yeah, they got the degree, but the degree didn't necessarily apply to what they were doing, or maybe they got the degree after they started doing what they were doing and they had to get the degree in order to keep the job, that type of thing. And so they've just kind of been at this like coasting, but they have this preconceived notion of what retirement is going to look like, but they don't really know what that looks like because the way that they live their life is a little bit different than like what the corporate norms are. It doesn't necessarily fit in that box. You know, I do have some clients that do stay up all night and they're thinking that there's something wrong with them because that's where they're going to write their next book or whatever. So I really think that this could be applied, not just, you know, in terms of education or even corporate, like, but beyond. I really think that there is, I'm like really interested in this. And I even like wrote down the EDGE method because I think it can be applied to those going into retirement and like literally looking like what that next step is. So this has been fascinating. And I thank you all for like really contributing and sharing the information.
Thanks, Maria. Meghan, why don't you close with what Team Neurodivergent is and what your mission is and how we can all help you and how we can find you.
Yeah, Team Neurodivergent helps organizations attract and grow top talent. And we do it in a neurodiversity affirming way. And so anybody that's interested in connecting, I'd love to share the podcast mini-series that I created for writing really inclusive job descriptions that attract the top talent. And the website is growtoptalent.com. And so I'd love to just continue to connect with people. And I have a TedX talk that's going to be coming out in the next couple of months about my own journey with understanding my giftedness from a strengths-based lens and how it impacted me at work. And so definitely keep an eye out for my TedX talk and connect to work together further, whether it's through my company speaking and workshops or program that I have to really help them attract and grow that top talent.
Thank you so much. Thank you to each of you who have joined in today. Michelle, if people want to find you, how can they find you?
Our MAGE, Massachusetts Association for Gifted Education, is massgifted.org. So I personally am president at massgifted.org. And we've got lots of support there. We happen to be one of the few gifted associations in the country that actually cater more to parents than to teachers. So we have members from all over the country. And we've got so many resources on our website. So please come take a look.
Thank you, Michelle. And Carly, how should people find you?
I don't have a website.
You
So-
cannot be found.
This is your only chance, limited edition, Carly, right before you right now. You want a phone number? Sorry to throw jokes, but I don't have a website. I'm building a bunch of things right now, but it's nothing for consumption at this point in time.
Okay, we'll stay tuned. And Maria.
People can find me on LinkedIn, or they can find me on my website at Geno, that's Geno.com.
And what clients are you working with, Maria?
I'm working with clients who are 5 to 10 years to retirement. So I help them finish their sort of last season in their role, and then help create what retirement will look like for them when they make that big jump.
Okay, thank you. And for all of those listening, I know that we talked about neurodiversity today in the workplace, also in education. Neurodiversity to me means differences, not deficits. And to all of us here, we believe that very firmly, very much a strengths-based approach. And many of our listeners may be highly and profoundly gifted folks and don't know it. Very often people figure this out when they have kids. So any parents who are having children who seem interesting, unusual, studying hinges on doors for exceptionally long periods of time. I think the message from this group is, let's drop the fear. Let's think about what comes with ease and flow for them. What are their strengths? What are they enjoying? And just so many parents today seem to be in such a state of paralysis and fear and self-doubt. Really look at your child, look at your young person. Maybe they came back home after dropping out of college. Look at them with a fresh set of eyes and intense curiosity, love, and help them find their passions. And if you're looking for a coach to help you with that, we have amazing people on this call right now who would love to help. Megan, I hope that many people reach out to you and are able to tap into these really interesting people who could be such an exceptional asset in the workplace. Thank you so much. I'm going to hit stop on the recording, and I know that we're going to stay on for a few minutes if we can. Thank you.